Yes, ma'am, we can start now.
Good evening. I welcome all the participants to today's session on the topic building a problem-solving mindset among the students. At the outset, I would like to thank AIMS and the president of AIMS for having given us this opportunity to share our thoughts on this. And I would also like to welcome Dr. Tapan Pandey, the resource person for today. I would like to just briefly introduce Dr. Tapan Pandey. He is the Pro Vice Chancellor at MIT, World Peace University, Pune. He headed various business schools, such as Narsum Monjee Institute of Management Studies, Hyderabad, Great Lakes Institute of Management, Chennai, BML Munjal University, and Jindal B School. Dr. Pandey has published extensively in the area of marketing, branding, customer relationship management, and sustainability. He has published more than 20 books and 100 research papers in leading journals. His work was cited widely. He is also the editor of NMIMS Management Review, which is a Web of Science journal. He has an MBA degree from Utkal University and a second MBA degree from the University of Houston, USA, and postdoctoral research at the University of Cincinnati and at the University of Texas at Dallas. He has worked at some of the leading business schools of India, such as the Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow, Kozhikode, and Indu. He is a visiting professor at the University of Paris, the University of Bordeaux, France, the University of Maryland, and the University of Texas, Dallas, and the China University of Politics and Law, Beijing. Sir, we are honored to have you, an accomplished researcher and academician, for today's session. The knowledge sharing session for faculty members on the topic, building a problem-solving mindset among the students. Welcome, sir. Before I hand over the session to you, I would just like to briefly introduce some of these topics. We are aware that the management education in India has evolved over the last 70 years. The pandemic has accelerated the pace of digitalization in education. We see the advent of virtual courses, greater access to global universities, specialized industry-relevant programs such as business analytics, fintech, healthcare management. And we are also seeing a compressed kind of programs where the duration is reduced for 1 year or 1.5 years. And we are also looking at stacking of credits, modular programs. We are also witnessing the usage of modern pedagogical tools like virtual reality, flipped classrooms. So this has drastically transformed management education, both for the educator and the students. We are witnessing a sea change in the learning approach and engagement of the students, the Gen Z now, and soon to become the Gen Alpha. As management educators, are we ready to engage them in a win-to-win situation? Sir, could you please share your thoughts on this?
Thank you, ma'am, for your introduction. I could see Professor Ramswamy Nandagopal here. Hello, sir. Good afternoon to you. It's nice to interact with faculty members. I normally conduct faculty development programs on various skill-based things which are there. For example, how to write good case studies, how to teach better, how to become a great storyteller on that part of it. That has been the journey so far as a scholar and as a professor there. But suddenly in last 5 to 7 years, both the role of professor, what they are supposed to deliver inside the classroom, and the approach towards the course has undergone quite a bit change. So way back in 2014, we started a project globally. Professor Srikant Dattar started this project at Harvard Business School. And Professor Dattar at that point of time was Senior Vice Dean at Harvard Business School. And currently he is the Dean of Harvard Business School. And based over his work over 65 countries, he drafted a new curriculum about new MBA. That's what it's called, new MBA. Or rethinking MBA, or thinking MBA in a newer way. And when this exercise was done, I handled the Indian part of the research of that work. And during those conversations, we were worried quite a lot that management education is going more from a research point of view, engineering way, which is becoming more scientific. by researchers controlling more number of external variables and trying to establish more scientific causal relationships. And on the delivery side, we are going more towards the arts way. So the conflict is there between what the professors deliver in the classroom and what the professors are focusing for research part of it. In US universities, that is not a challenge because in the US universities, the new knowledge is always with the academicians and the industry follows that as a practice. Whereas in the Indian context, the practice is always new with the industry and academicians follow them. So a lot of management schools, I don't say all of them, are actually laggards in terms of what is the industry expectations. So there was a change in the thought process that was going on at the research stage is how exactly should the design of MBA curriculum be. Second side, somewhere in the race of matching up to each other, the industry moved far ahead and not many grounded theories have been built by taking the practices from the industry and bringing it to the classrooms there. It is not actually a common practice for faculty members to quit their job or take a break, go to the industry, work there and come back and bring those learnings into the classroom. So that's what case writing helps quite a bit because they get a chance to look at business problems and solve those business problems there. But more than that, suddenly we heard something called Industry 4.0. And the expectations both in terms of technical manpower as well as business manpower underwent a change once we see huge amount of technology interventions into the business practices there. So that was another thing that got added into that part. The fourth thing that happened is something called Web 3.0. So suddenly we found out that Web 3.0 is also influencing the way we are doing business. While we thought that between 2015 and 2020, still the world will be focused on making bigger scale of operations because we are integrating globally. But suddenly in last 3 to 4 years, if you look at the investment patterns of the business, they have moved more into digital transformations, more into bringing efficiency and lean designs than exactly going into the scale part of it. It's also reflected in the political domain. We understand there are some politicians across the world who propounded about globalization, propounded about blurring of boundaries and achieving business scales. And in last 5-year elections, all of them have lost elections. Their own political mandate they have lost. And people, those who preached about nationalism, those who preached about domestication, at a macro level, those kind of changes were happening. So suddenly there was a reorientation towards domesticating your business and looking at the success. Now, if a scholar or a professor of management, he is confused with all these drastic, dynamic, and quick changes that happened there. But from the beginning, we always wanted the students to be good managers and problem solvers. At no point of time, the students of management were expected to mug up theories and write theories in the examination system, despite the universities saying that there are 5 units of the course, and from each unit there will be 2 questions, and those 2 questions you have to answer one of those questions, and there will be a case which is of 20 lines, and you have to answer that case with 100 lines. That was the dichotomy of many university systems. We did not experience that part, luckily, because I joined 22 years before, post my PhD at Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow. But when I joined, I carried the same thought, like many of you, those who are listening to me, are part of this exercise. So my thought was also that go to the class and you preach whatever it is written in the book there. And since I came from the university background and landed up for some or other reasons, maybe I was lucky in that sense to go there and get into a job where theory is not important and professors were more teaching through the case method. So I was wondering what to do there. So I sat through almost for 6 months, 2 professors across different programs. So I sat through Professor Prem Purwar, who is no more. He's a consumer behavior professor, a senior professor in marketing. I sat through Professor Ashok Banerjee's class, who is a financial and accounts professor, who is currently I am Udaipur director. I sat through Sini Srinivasan's class, Sini's class, who is in IIM Bangalore now, who was younger to me, but was groomed at IIM Ahmedabad. So I got a variety of delivery methods and mechanisms which was there, and I had to choose one of them or all of them, right? Let me put that in all of them. But as a human being, you cannot really adapt yourself to all of them. So you prefer which one is the easier one to do that part of it. But all the methods which were talked about, whether it is a case class or a scenario building class or a simulation class, everywhere the approach was more exactly how do you make better decisions? How students should make better decisions? How do students solve the problems there? That was the approach. So when Professor Nandagopal wanted me to address to faculty colleagues, particularly younger colleagues, those who have started their career in a couple of years, because I'm completing 30 years of my career this year. So that's why I said younger colleagues. So nobody should feel bad about that part of it. Because when you are young, you have a lot of things to learn and understand. And once you grow old, your learning slows down. And then you start thinking that, okay, I've done enough. Let's not really bother about doing that part, which didn't happen because 3-4 years before I identified sustainability as a new area of research. So my impetus on research has moved from hardcore branding and CRM into sustainability research. And I do more work in that domain these days, more impactful work on that days in that domain I do there. So what is that a professor should think about problem solving, other than saying that, okay, I teach them about problem solving because I teach them through case methods. So since case methods have their own limitation in terms of a time period on which the case was written, and when you catch that case, unless that's a classic case, if you catch that case and try to bring in, there is a confusion in terms of geographic applicability. So when I teach a case, I remember I was teaching a case called Port Marine, which is in a marketing implementation case, which has got, I think, 2 pages of sentences and 20 pages of tables. And I was teaching to a class of marketing strategy course. And at the end of the class, I was coming back. I can recall this because that was the first hard-hitting feedback I got in my life. And somebody called me from the back in IIM Lucknow and says, Professor, you taught bullshit. I don't know how many of your students can really say like this, but in an IIM, they can say like this if they didn't like it. And then I stayed back. I said, what happened? He says, I didn't understand whether it was a marketing class or a finance class. Probably I was trying to glorify my new learning on financial accounting and finances from Ashok Banerjee's class. So I was playing more with the numbers than try to understand what is to be done there. It's essentially about selling some speedboats in an American environment. So first of all, students didn't understand what is a speedboat, and then why should an MBA grad sail a speedboat, and what are these lakes, and why should the speedboats be in the lakes there, and then about all these numbers and ratios which are involved in that case. So when I look back, I was a disaster in that class. I understood, but the student had the courage to really call me back, and then I took 45 minutes to explain the case to him. I hope many of you know the student. His name is Manjunath, and he was later killed by a dealer of a petrol pump owner in Lakhimpur in Uttar Pradesh because he joined Indian Oil after the course there. And there's a movie made on his life. So he was a student who gave me the first feedback that just by playing numbers, I taught bullshit inside the classroom because the domain was different and the context was different. So I understand that when you as a professor teach courses, domain and context are very important. So aping an American case into the classroom doesn't happen there. It doesn't really open up. But when the number comes, since I taught to a large number of IIT graduates inside my classroom, when the numbers came in, it was really easy for us to play around the numbers without understanding on what context this is being done. But just remember, I was just 25-year-old at that point of time. I just finished my PhD and 24-year-old, and then went to a couple of months after the PhD, I just landed up with this job without any idea. Probably if you bring that today, I will not risk that kind of a case in my class there. Let me confess in that way. The latter part of life, I went to teach in China. I thought they're hardworking like us. And I thought that in a case class, you explore the mind of the student. You allow them to explore and bring all possible options into the blackboards. And then you go and evaluate one by one. And then finally you arrive at fewer couple of alternatives, which you have to evaluate them by using some metrics or context for somebody to make a decision. That's our way of training. Generate alternatives in the class, evaluate each of these alternatives with some metrics or some performance measurement, and then let the student understand that in a situation like this, what should be your decision. You understand that's nice in an American class where they can talk anything. That's nice in an Indian class because students were opening up with engineering background, confident of getting into a job. But I forgot that that's not nice to a Chinese student, because the Chinese student has come through a very rigorous exercise. And in the education system, they don't allow them to think actually. So when you said, why don't you think about these options? They don't know how to think. This is very similar to when we are in our school. That is my first point for faculty when we talk about how do you really build up the problem solving mindset of our student. Now I can say that fairly all of you have gone through that age of 4, and that was the best time of your life. So in the age of 3, 4, you really created the maximum amount of problem for your parents because you wanted an explanation on everything. You wanted an explanation why the stars are smaller, why the moon is like this, why the water flows in that way. You are so nice at that point of time because you are exploring. And suddenly your parents dumped you into a school where the teacher said, don't think. Whatever I am saying, take note of it and learn that part. When that process started, which is a formal school education system that we understand, where you are not supposed to think, but you are supposed to listen to your teacher and take the notes, and mom will go back home, mom will open the note and see what task has been given there. So you killed that inquisitiveness in the student there. So I think the first lesson from this example, an extreme case of a Chinese student versus an Indian student who goes to a formal education system, is please don't kill that child. So first thing that I want all the professors to take care is keep that curiosity in the mind of your student. If you kill the curiosity and say that you know everything, you know that you don't know everything, because Google knows more than you and they know how to access that and get that information. So first idea about problem solving is how do you really build up that kind of a curiosity in the mind of your students so that they go back to when they are age of 4. I don't want them to mature. So in a class, probably all of you will want your student to have a matured conversation. But I would probably like my student to go back to class 4, 5 days and fiddle around things. I'll tell you the reason why. I am coming to the second point. The second point is the idea of causality that we teach to our student. We say that fine, if the price goes this higher, the quantity demanded will go down. But somewhere we forget that there is something called subject to. So if you go back today and ask your student, they will explain the first part very nicely. They can draw the graph also. But when you ask them about subject to, then there is confusion in their mind from where subject to came, right? What I'm trying to drive in is that problems in our life are not structured, right? So we as an instructor cannot really give a structured solution to a problem there, because problems are unstructured. I can give examples there. I teach something called BCG matrix, Boston Consulting Group matrix, which is a common matrix taught to the students there. I can pretty sure 80% of students don't know how that x-axis is being measured, right? And what is the value of 10 at the end and 1 in the middle and 0 at this end. The reason being they don't know that the x-axis is actually a log scale and the value of log 10 is equal to 1. So whenever you have something called 1, that means you have 100% of the market share. And when you say 0, you have 0% of the market share. So there is a challenge for the student to comprehend whatever we are talking about, challenge for a student to comprehend in that case what is being taught there. So since the problems are not structured, we cannot really teach our students something which is really structured. So I'll give you one anecdote from my own personal life example. When my son was 4 or 5 years old, at home in Lucknow campus, he was very curious to look at the electric power points, plug points, and he will take something to put inside, and then I was scared that he may get electric shock. So every time we will stop him from doing this because he may get high voltage electric. But we could not resolve that because he was very curious. He was very curious to know what it is inside, why the light comes up there. So one day I had to take him to my behavioral lab on campus and put some microampere of currents and allow him to go and touch it. So when he touched that power plug, he got a mild electric shock. And after some days, I found out that at home, he is not experimenting on that part of it. So the second point is you should allow your student to experiment quite a lot if they have to develop a problem solving mindset. The first point is about be inquisitive. See that how they become more inquisitive. In our strategy course, marketing strategy course, all of you, those who are teaching, you know that we do something called cross, do something called scenario building. We do decision tree analysis. So when you look at them, these are actually methods which are used for building that curiosity among the students so that he can take up if but models and work on those kind of models. The second part that I am talking about is since problems are not structured, there is no absolute solution. So what you should do is you should allow your student to experiment, right? I read a book, I don't know how many of you have read this book, very interesting book I read called The Monk and the Riddle. That's the name of the book. The story goes like this. Here is a angel investor. I'm an angel investor, so I read that book for that reason. And this angel investor is in Silicon Valley, so he goes and basically he drinks coffee in a restaurant. So he will go and sit down and drink a coffee. So any new ambitious techpreneur who wants to invest, get investment for his business, will get a chance to interact with him and then make his presentations. He will go and make his PowerPoint presentations with Excel files with its business model. And if he invests, agrees and he invests, it's sure that there are another 20 people just by his news of him investing, they will come back and they will invest. That's the kind of courage people trust people hard on this angel investor. So one day, one person, young guy, one of your students, MBA class mostly, comes back to him and says that I would like to make a presentation. And then this guy says, okay, fine, you make the presentation. So he makes a presentation and his business model was basically called www.funerals.com. So he was actually building an aggregator model. And in the aggregator model, he was trying to look at all the services which are required for a funeral. He wanted to bring all service provider to one platform and help people who are grieving for somebody's death to go back and get the services of this company. So this book has got many chapters. As you move ahead with the chapters, you see the conversation between the angel investor and this young techpreneur. And on each time he goes back and he changes his business plan. And finally, when his business plan is robust, in this business, this company is called circleoflife.com. So somebody who wants to provide the funeral services ends up making a business model called circleoflife.com. That is how the refinement happens and experimentation happens. One of my students in Great Lakes long time back, who was actually a Brahmin girl who was not getting a boy to marry, comes back to me in my digital marketing course and says that I will experiment with a social media campaign about paper jewelry. You understand, Srividya madam, that in India, when you think about jewelry, they're all metal. They may be silver, they may be gold. We are not accustomed to paper jewelry. But in Western world, jewelry is a disposable item, perishable item. In India, they are durable item, goes from generation to generation. And you understand how many metric tons of the gold you have saved in India. India will be richer if all of you donate all the gold that you have got in your home there. So we said, okay, let us start this campaign. So we brought out this idea of paper jewelry, so that depending on the kind of attire you are wearing, suppose you are in a pink today, you can have a different kind of jewelry. Tomorrow, when you come to blue, you'll have a different kind of jewelry. And the prices are so low that you should not worry about that part. And that is how the experimentation in the code started. At the subsequent period of time, she built a big business empire called craftsvilla.com. Currently, Siege was 600 crores. So a business which started talking about the jewelry, paper jewelry, ends up being a big challenge to Five India and being an alternative to Five India. That's what happened in the process. So the second point I want all the faculty members to carry is to allow your student to experiment. Don't force them into a decision. Allow them to do experimentation. Whole idea is that the problem is not structured, future is not known. So if they can do experimentation, probably their adaptability to different evolving scenarios will be higher. As a result of that, the chances of the enterprise failing is actually lower. But I'll go back to the story that I talked about, the monk and the riddle. Why the name monk and the riddle? So here is this angel investor. He is moving in Myanmar, which is close to India. And he saw a monk coming in a motorcycle. You know, monks have motorcycles there. And he wants a lift. So they're in a tea shop, they're in a lift. So there is a conversation between the monk and the angel investor. And in that case, I will come back to question. Now, please hold on. Let me finish this. And when we have a conversation, I'll take up questions. So then he says that how do you throw an egg from 4 feet and the egg doesn't break? That's the riddle the monk asks. We understand the egg that we use. If you throw it, it will break. So the question was, how do you really throw the egg so that the egg will not break? So the idea is that then he tries all combinations of answering to the monk, and the monk laughs. And the monk finally says that catch the egg at 3 feet. Because the egg is at 4 feet from the earth. If it touches the earth, then it will break. But if you catch it at the 3 feet, it will not break for that. Right? That's was the thought he tries to bring in. So second idea is to look at experimentation, to be a good problem solver. Since the problem is not structured, please allow students to do experimentation in that part. Now, when I was a child, I was growing up, I was called a fly master in my school. Because whenever it rains, you will find out those insects or the flies which come in. They have 2 flapping wings. And I used to fix out a small thread and one of the legs of that bird. And whenever I'll walk on the street, this bird, this small insect, the fly will go, and I'll have the thread in my hand. I know many of you male faculty members, I don't know whether Sribidya madam this or not, but many men faculty members who was a child, they have done that part, right? We enjoy doing it. Before Diwali, I think a lot of these kind of flies come there. So since I come from the eastern part of India where a lot of rain happens, it was natural. I was a fly master because I'll have 20 of them. One on my head, one on my ear, on that part of it. But it is not about flying. I looked at the eyes of this dragonfly. It's called a dragonfly. And I found out that this dragonfly has got 5 eyes.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2 eyes. Horses have 2 eyes. Horses have a wider vision than us because we can only see the front. But horses can see the sides also. But this dragonfly has got 360-degree view.
Oh.
So it is very difficult to catch a dragonfly because it sees all 360 degree. You know, there's a cricketer called Surya Kumar Yadav. They call him as a 360-degree cricketer. So this dragonfly is like a 360-degree view it has got. I think the third element that I want to drive into the faculty members is to let your student be like the dragonfly. If the student is like the dragonfly, instead of 2 eyes, it will have multiple eyes. So it can see a problem from multiple point of view. So he can have a 360-degree view of the problem. I understand all of you say that it's not a marketing problem, though it is my marketing class. In conversations, it may end up doing a different kind of a problem. I had experimented while teaching faculty members with a case, Harvard Business School case called Nalli Silk, which is a Chennai-based silk firm. It was given to participants, and I found out how the case has moved from what it is to what it is possible. So one group came, it was dominated by strategy professors. They made actually the case as a strategy case. Another group had marketing faculties. They made it a marketing case. Actually, it is a cost accounting case. But it was fun on my part to watch how they are making whatever they feel like doing it, because it opens up how you can see different sides. So I think the third idea that comes while building the problem solving mindset of your student is to understand the dragonfly behavior and try to ensure that your student becomes a dragonfly, is not it? So that's the third element that we'll talk about. Now, most of the times, let's move to the next one. Most of the times when you go and have a conversation, we imagine about a boardroom, right? Professor Nandagopal is good in that because he's the president of AIIMS. And I was a part of the executive committee a couple of years before. So we have all boardroom conversations. And we think that every person in the boardroom is the smartest guy and they know everything. But we understand that there are people outside the boardroom also. For example, in my growing up years as an academician, I always looked at a person called Rajat Gupta. And I said that, oh, consulting, I'll be like him. By the time I matured myself as a consultant, started earning fair money, he was behind the bar, right, for insider trading information. Then I understood, oh, that means there are smarter people outside the boardroom who are getting this information and they are doing all this part, right? So never teach your student that the smartest chap is always inside the boardroom. Actually, the smartest chap is outside the boardroom. That means a problem is not to be solved by the person who are meant to solve the problem. There are people who are outside who can solve your problem. Many a times as a teacher, when we groom our students, we always force that he is the smartest one and the best one to solve the problem there, right? How do we simulate this in the classrooms? Okay, here is a video. And in the video, we see a loaded truck that comes, and the truck has to go below a bridge. But when it reaches the bridge, the height of the truck is higher than the bridge part of it, right? Height of the bridge. Then the smartest chap who is on the street says that just puncture your tires. So the tire level come down and then your truck will pass through, right? And all other scientists will come back and say the bridge should have been built in a different way. The truck manufacturer doesn't look into the ergonomics of the design. But the simplest solution is to puncture the tires and take it to the other side. So many a times we get these wonderful, nice solutions that comes out from people who are outside the boardroom there. Because ability of people who are structured thinking to solve unstructured problems is very limited. So the fourth principle that we have talked about is a principle where please accept that the most smartest person who can actually solve the problem is outside the boardroom where the conversation happens there. When I was working on a client which was actually selling sanitary ware, and then they wanted to do a brand extension and then enter into lighting business. That's a campaign which some of you must have seen on television that goes, and many of my senior colleagues say that was the worst thing that I have written ever in my life as far as my advertising branding campaign is concerned. So the person starts imagining how Jaguar as a brand, which is into sanitary ware, works inside a boardroom. So I tried to show somebody in the bathtub, somebody under a shower, and finally this fellow said, I'm using testimonial evidence, all marketing professors know that. And finally this person says that actually we are fitting lights. So you have to really talk about Jaguar sanitary ware, making an extension to another category of lighting. And what is a rogged way of making presentation that part. My friend Gauri Sindhe has shot the film, but I wrote the script part of it in that case. So I hope I have talked about this part. Again, let me go back to my rule number 1. Madam, rule number 1 is being ever curious.
Curious.
You should be always curious about every element of your problem, right? Let's go back to rule number 2. Nobody is perfect.
Yeah.
Being an imperfectionist with a high tolerance for ambiguity, that will help you to experiment a lot, accept ambiguity and do that part. The third element that I talked about, the dragonfly eye. The dragonfly eye view of the world to see through multiple lenses. Do we allow our student to look at multiple lenses? Just because I'm a marketing professor, I have to force my student to think about the problem only from the marketing way that is there. The last point that I talked about is called collective intelligence. We understand that collective intelligence is always higher than the individual intelligence in that process. Though I have a paper that works against this theory. I have a paper with Professor Sunil Saddev, who was my colleague at IIM Kozhikode. We are working. It's called Lone Wolf Salesmanship Behavior. We talk some animal syndromes and try to study salesmanship behavior. We understand most of the wolves, when they hunt in groups. So they are successful as a team. So many people believe that sales function works better when they are in a team. But we also understand when a wolf is alone, his tail is up. That means he's the most aggressive one. So we are trying to establish this antithesis that team selling is worse than individual selling. But the point that I'm trying to drive in is about collective intelligence. So collective intelligence acknowledges that the smartest people are not inside the boardroom. They are always outside the boardroom there, right? And I talked about experimentation that I call as occurrent behavior, right? Occurrent behavior. So how exactly you can pursue occurrent behavior with a lot of experimentation that happens there. Do we allow our students to do experiment? I think design thinking is a course that helps a lot of people to do this kind of experimentation. And I could see that some of people have sent me chat messages saying that I'm a good storyteller. I accept the fact that I am a good storyteller. So you have a brilliant solution, but unless you have a story, people are not going to believe on the story that you tell about that part. So it is not about just it, but practice and show and tell. So I think what is important for professor is to teach their student how to be a great storyteller. And storytelling is very easy, madam, to do that part. For example, all of us know there are only 19 formulas on Hindi films are being made, Indian films are being made. Only 19. We make 900 films. I did research and I have a couple of papers on brand placement in films while I was doing that research. I should only 19 formulas. But the linearity of the movie is very simple. There will be hero, heroine, bring out an imbalance between both of them. Hero is rich, heroine is poor, heroine is rich, hero is poor. So there should be a class conflict and there should be a power balance. So you bring out a villain. Normally villains are more powerful than the hero. So the hero has to have a conflict. And finally, somebody has to win in that exercise. And the end frame of the movie says, maybe it is in Tamil or Telugu or in Hindi, and they lived after happily after. That's the line they say. So I bought a ticket at 6 o'clock and went to see the movie. And 9 o'clock, when the movie ended, they said they lived after happily. I thought, let me go back and see how they lived happily. I bought ticket from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock, but the movie started from the beginning. I was expecting that they'll show me how 9 to 12 they lived happily. So it is important for us actually to tell a good story. I don't know how many business schools are there. They have a course on storytelling. So it is important for us to train our students about storytelling. So we should play like a child, as I have mentioned about, should always ask questions. So good problem solving skill always talks about designing experiments and reduce uncertainties, and always think like the dragonfly that I have talked about in my story. Then there are something called wicked 7. I'm pretty sure that professors know what are these wicked 7, right? So I was talking this from an occurrent behavior. I didn't explain that in detail. I will explain that in detail before I open up for the questions. So there are some 7 things which are actually killing us. One of these things is killing us is called climate collapse. It is so nice for professors to talk about climate change, but just go back and look at a couple of Mediterranean seas, how they are dying and how water resources are going there. Please realize that we are in a stage of climate collapse. The basic reason from my research I am talking about, today we are consuming 150% of 100% what the earth can give us. So we are already doing unsustainable consumption. And during your lifetime, if you survive till 2050, which I will not, but if you survive by that time, you know that you'll be consuming 500% of the earth. So ability of the earth to produce is 100% and you animals will consume 500%. Today you have driven away all other animals, assuming that human race has control over all the resources of the world. And one day there will be a fight among the human race, like the zombie fights, that who has more control. So this is the first wicked element of our society is called climate collapse. And the degree of inequality. Inequality has many dimensions: color, religion, gender. It's a rise. I was thinking that it will come down as we progress, but material progress brings more and more inequality in the same. And there are higher degree of extremism. Many of you behave in that way, higher degree of extremism. Either you are too sad or you are too happy, but life cannot be like this. And every now and then we hear about the story of the war. So war is another wicked element we have got. And our lives cannot be free from corruption, either from receiving side or giving side. Corruption is one element. And when you look at a couple of African children life, you look at how health and livelihood is in problem there. And you know how much of domestic migration happens in India. We saw the reverse migration during COVID. The population and the migration is another challenge. I call them as the 7 wicked elements on that. So occurrent behavior should give attention to the wicked 7 which are there. If you do not solve these problems, none of your solutions of marketing or finance or HR will going to really work in that way. So let me stop here. So essentially to summarize, I have 6 things that I have talked about. Again, I'll reiterate: ever curious, take your student to age of 4. Second element, accept imperfectionism, accept ambiguity because problems are given to you which are unstructured. Third, be like a dragonfly, have a 360 view. Fourth, there is a lot of occurrent behavior outside the context of business that your student need to appreciate and look into that part of it. So he should experiment on that part. Then the 5th element is about collective intelligence. Please accept the fact that all 30, 40, 15 of them who are listening, 60 of them we are listening, the guys outside are more intelligent than that part. And last point is, thank you for holding on to me for last 43 minutes because I told many stories to you. Thank you, madam. Thank you, Professor Nandgopal. I'm open to questions now. So you can switch on and then you can.
Yeah. So thank you very much, for sharing some of the insights from your own teaching experience as well as from your, from family examples, and for giving the framework for delivering a problem-solving mindset. I'm sure the faculty members will try to do this to try to cultivate that inquisitiveness, allow the students to experiment, allow them to learn, to work in multiple directions, and also understand that collective intelligence is higher sometimes, and sometimes outside the boardroom, you have more smarter people. But given said and done all of these things, how many of our faculty members will be able to do this? So, you have rightly pointed out, even in a case study methodology, which we think is far superior than any other, pedagogy that we have used, they are still in silos. And I think problem solving mentality needs an integrative kind of integration of all of these domains. So, just, because most of us are all faculty members here, if you can just throw light on, we know that this is the framework and we will try to do this, but are we even trained to do that, as faculty members? So what can we do? And I know that you are holding a lot of training sessions and other things. So maybe just give us a word of advice or just your insights on this.
I think I can share experiences for doing that part of it. So I'll go back to what we worked with Professor Srikant Tattar at the beginning of it. We said that instead of designing courses as skill, knowledge, and attitude courses, we said that we'll be designing courses into 3 levels. The first is called the doing level. The second is called the knowing level, and the being level. So doing levels, I'll deliver theories. He should know Excel. He should know this part. Knowing levels, probably I'll teach him digital revolutions, blockchain, and that stuff. But the most difficult one is the third level, the being level, where the leadership journey happens. How do I teach them? There are 2 ways I teach. I teach a course on leadership, but I don't use any textbook. I use only films. So I'll ask them to come and sit with me and watch a film called The Breeze on the River Kwai. It's a very old film. This is about the Second World War between an English people who are being controlled by Japanese captors, and they want to build a bridge in Myanmar. You know that the Second World War, the United Force won because of Indian soldiers. So the Japanese people wanted to transport some goods and arms and ammunition to India to defeat Indian army. And this bridge was very important. And the Japanese fellows were not able to build it up. And then this fellow says that if you give proper respect to my team, we will use British engineering and we'll build the bridge. So the bridge is being built, and with a sense of pride, he works on the bridge. And then he finds there are bombs put behind the bridge by one of his ex-friends there. And then he goes and fights against him. And finally, what happens is he himself blows the bridge. Now, this is the nice part of the story. But the question is, in life, you are confronted with 2 goals, instrumental goal and end state goal. So winning the war is end state goal. Building the bridge is instrumental goal. How do you go and solve instrumental goal, end state goal, and which one do you choose from that? Actually, I wanted to ask this question to my student, but instead of asking this to my student, I took them to watch this film. And then I told them, this is how you are going to look at and try to solve that part, right? So the faculty should be open to do this kind of experimentation there. Then only you'll be able to achieve this, to take them beyond the classrooms and do. So I told you the third part is very difficult. In a lighter note, towards end of my course, I took them to Sivapuri near Rishikesh, which is 60 kilometers upstream. And I wanted them to be a part of a whitewater rafting. And I had given very clear instruction to my students who is going to play what role. There are boys and girls. I said that if the girls fall into the water, the boys have to go and save and when the fatter boys should be on the boat so they can lift them up. But you understand, when the girls jumped into the water or fell into the water, all the boys were outside the boat. The professor was only inside the boat, and the professor had to pull anyone inside this. So all that planning that you have done, team building, storming, forming, everything goes off a toss when it comes to the practical part of it. And then you have to teach them within the river. You have to teach them what exactly is the correct way of doing it. This kind of experimentation faculty members are required to do in that sense. It may not be 100% of a course, but maybe at some levels they can do this kind of experimentations. I could read out, there are a few comments about storytelling. Maybe at some point.
Yes, sir. There is a professor in Gurunath Naidu who is asking you to share some tips for effective storytelling.
Yes, sir. I can take a full session on storytelling. Actually, I train people on storytelling. I train people on that, but few ideas, 1-2 ideas because of the paucity of time, I'll say. So basically, there are three kind of stories that we make, right? It depends on what kind of audience we have in. For example, if this audience is not involved audience, what I could have done is I could have talked about the Ganges story at the beginning, right? So the climax part of my conversation was the 6-step model that I talked about, which I train people about. But I know that the faculty members are at least willing to listen to me because of my white hair. So that's why I could reserve my most difficult, most strongest argument towards the end and come back for that, right? That's what we did. So when you structure a story, there are three ways to structure it: anti-climax way, climax way, and pyramidal way. So when the audience is not involved, you probably do the anticlimax. So you have seen in the film, Rajnikant will go and kill somebody, and after that you find out why the killing happened, the story unfolds. Or you see a film where everything happens and finally Rajnikant kills. It's not it. The strongest argument is given at the end. So when you look at Titan watches, the last line of the Titan watch advertising is a Tata product. That is the strongest argument that comes at the end of it. When we see the Captain Cook salt, which nobody knows what is Captain Cook, the first argument, पता नहीं ये कहाँ से आ गया, ये Tata salt. So the strongest argument is given at the beginning to just jolt you that you are fighting against Tata salt. And the third category of storytelling is actually called the pyramidal structuring. Where the strongest argument is given at the central part of it. So there are three ways of doing that part of it. But some other time, I can do a full session on storytelling, which is important. I train people, particularly senior leaders, about storytelling and what kind of stories that structure-wise stories can be climax order, anti-climax order, and pyramidal storytelling.
Sir, thank you, sir. We have, from Professor Vinod Damlekar. It's more like a comment, problem-solving mindset. Problems can be either structured or otherwise. I also learned that experimentation is a good technique to explore problems. Students must be encouraged to be curious with their ideas. My other discoveries are, culture is a very big mediator in learning, especially from your example from China. Whatever the data in and the nature of the case study, the teacher must be focused on the objective theme of the session so as not to disappoint the students. Storytelling is an important skill for teachers. Yeah, so this is more like a comment. Yeah.
To support this, I'll tell you one line.
Yes, sir.
What is the fundamental philosophy behind my teaching? Only one line. Tell them what you want to tell them.
Okay.
Comma, comma, tell them, comma, tell them what you have told them.
Oh, okay.
That's the essence of being a good teacher. Tell them what you want to tell them.
Okay.
Opening. Tell them that's your class. But without summarizing, it doesn't lead anywhere. So finally, I told these are the 6 things. Piece by piece, I unraveled it. And these are the 6 things that we have to do. So philosophy teaching is these 2. There are 2 philosophies of teaching. One is that this is single sentence. So when I was at Harvard Business School undergoing a training program, I got a professor who taught me something called airport theory. I'll just take 1 minute to explain what is an airport theory. So we teach so many things inside the classroom. I know whom we are teaching. We are teaching to a human being whose memory is 186, not even Pentium is 186, because that memory box was built billions years before. The professor said, before you go to the class, make 5 paper planes. On the wings of the paper plane, write what are those 5 things that your student is going to learn. Keep these paper planes. So if you're teaching a course of 20 sessions, it is not necessary that you are going to have 100 paper planes. Around 65 paper planes you will make. 15 years after, when you meet the same student in the airport, another airport, and you have a conversation about the class, try to remember how many of those airplanes that the student has talked about. This is the airplane theory of teaching. So don't try to give too much to your student because he cannot bear it. But if you're able to give 4 or 5 things to the student at the end of the class, and he carries it for 15, 20 years and uses in his lifetime, that is where the success of a teacher comes there. I always find myself with the people who are listening to me because I came from university system, right? I went to a university business school. My teacher is here also listening to me. She has sent a message, I could see that. And I got educated in that system, but I taught in bigger schools. But my mindset, orientation training all happened. So I always fancy my chances to the audience, those who are listening to me. And I learned from a lot of people how to build it up. I was lucky to get good mentors to build it up. So these are simple things that we need to remember as a teacher when we build that part.
Thank you, Professor. I think, from what you have shared to us, we understand that definitely to engage with the Gen Z and also with Gen Alpha, we need to change the way that we are delivering our courses. Storytelling definitely is one thing, and also to develop this framework of this problem solving mindset. It definitely is a challenge, though this has been one of the top skills which are required by the recruiters. At least 70% of the time they've found that they are lacking in that. And it is definitely going to be a challenge for educators and for educational institutions to try to develop this kind of skill sets. And many times, this is outcome of this is usually any of the skills that we have, they list like analytical thinking, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving mindset. All of these things are, for at least for most of the B schools, it's more like an outcome, right? So that mindset, because, has to change. And I think, I hope that those of us who have listened to you will at least try and start using this framework for developing this problem solving mindset among the students. And the COVID has disrupted the existing system. We have also observed that there are new systems which are evolving. It is more like a blessing in disguise. And I hope, with your inputs, we will be able to bring in some kind of a change. At least some of us who are here, we will try to change the pedagogy to a different level. Maybe there's also calls for, is the curriculum conducive to that? And not all of them might, because you said that you come from an university system. We know that management education in India has different types of structures, like, so yes, that would be a challenge, but I'm sure within the classrooms, our faculty should be able to try and, experiment these kind of pedagogy. Thank you very, very much. If we are having...
I think we are done. We will close this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Srividya, for your time, for taking me through this exercise, and to all the gentlemen and madam, those who are present here, for your participation and questions that you have asked. And that made me to also curious to look at these questions. Some of them I have not thought that way, but that will make me to think in a different way. How do I solve that part? As I've told, I'll come back again if that opportunity comes. I'll come back again and take you through a technical session on how to do the storytelling part of it. Maybe one session on how to do the storytelling in financial accounting I'll teach.
Oh, that's nice.
People will think it is difficult, but it is possible. We can teach through storytelling. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very, very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks to all the participants.